The snow had been falling for 2 days without slowing, and the world had been reduced to the color of ash and bone. Cora Whitfield could no longer feel her feet. She knew they were still there because she could see them. Two dark shapes moving one after another through drifts that reached her knees. She was 11 years old. She had been walking for 3 days. In her arms, wrapped in what remained of her father's wool coat, was her brother Emmett, who was 18 months old and had stopped crying 6 hours ago. That silence was worse than the crying. She had seen the smoke from a mile back, a thin gray thread rising against the white sky, promising what she no longer believed in: warmth, safety, a door that opened instead of closing. She had knocked on 3 doors since leaving Mill Creek. The first had not answered. The second had told her to try the church in town. The third, a woman with kind eyes and a hard mouth, had given her a heel of bread and said, "Child, I can't feed my own." Cora had thanked her anyway. Her mother had taught her that. You thanked people even when they gave you almost nothing, because almost nothing was still more than nothing, and pride was a luxury you could not afford when a baby's belly was empty. The ranch house sat in a hollow between 2 hills, sheltered from the worst of the wind by a stand of pine. A barn, solid and weathered, stood to the east. Cora could see horses in the corral, dark shapes against the snow, and the sight of them, animals that were fed, animals that were cared for, made something twist in her chest that she did not have a name for. She climbed the fence because the gate was too far, and she was not certain her hands could manage the latch. The snow on the yard side was deeper, untouched. She waded through it, Emmett heavy against her shoulder, his breathing shallow and fast. She had not eaten in 2 days. He had not eaten in 1. The last thing in her stomach had been melted snow, swallowed because her mother had told her that snow would keep you alive even when it made you colder. She reached the porch. 3 wooden steps, snow-covered. She climbed them. The door was thick plank, painted blue once, faded now to the color of old denim. She raised her fist and knocked. The sound was small. Her hands were too cold to make a proper fist. She knocked again, harder, using the heel of her palm against the wood. The door opened. The man who stood there was broad and bearded, his face weathered the color of old leather. He wore a wool shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and she could see the dark hair on his forearms, the tendons standing as he gripped the door frame. He looked at her. Then he looked at the baby in her arms. Cora straightened her shoulders. She looked him in the eyes. She had promised herself that she would not cry, that she would not beg, that she would offer something in return for whatever mercy this stranger might possess. Her mother had been a seamstress. Her father had been a carpenter. Cora had been both of those things in the months since the fever took them, and she had learned that everyone wanted something done. "Please," she said. Her voice cracked. She hated that it cracked. "My little brother is hungry. I'll do any work." The man did not move. He stood in the doorway, the warm air from inside pressing past him into the cold, and she watched his face as something passed behind his eyes. A shadow, a memory, a door opening and closing in the same instant. He reached out, not for the baby, for her arm. His hand was warm even through her sleeve, and the warmth was so shocking that she nearly dropped Emmett. "Come inside," Silas Thorne said. "Both of you, now." If the sight of a child offering everything she has left for one warm meal moves something in you, stay with this story. Watch it through to the last word. Hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. Let's see how far Cora's story travels. John and Margaret Whitfield had come to Mill Creek in the spring of 1881, when Cora was 9 and Emmett was not yet a thought in anyone's mind. John was a carpenter. Margaret took in washing and mending. They built a small house on the edge of town, 2 rooms with a stove that drew well, and a bed frame John had carved with a pattern of leaves. Cora remembered the leaves. She had traced them with her finger while her mother read to her from the Bible in the evenings, the light from the lamp making the wood seem alive. Emmett was born in the winter of 1882. A hard birth. Margaret was never quite strong after, though she hid it well, rising before dawn to finish the mending, singing while she worked in a voice that grew thinner as the months passed. John took extra work, building a new mercantile on Main Street, adding a room to the preacher's house, anything to keep the stove fed and the doctor paid. Then, in August of 1883, the scaffolding failed. John fell 20 feet onto the packed earth of the mercantile yard. He lived for 3 hours. Cora sat with him while her mother ran for the doctor. He held Cora's hand and told her to take care of her mother. He said it calmly, the way he said everything, as if it were a simple instruction about where to find a hammer. Then he closed his eyes and did not open them. Margaret held on for 5 more months. She worked until she could not stand. She hid her coughing from the children until she could no longer hide it. The doctor called it consumption. Cora called it grief, eating her mother from the inside out. Margaret died on a Sunday morning in January, 3 weeks before the snow began. She had kissed Cora's forehead and said, "You're strong enough. You've always been strong enough." Cora buried her beside John in the churchyard. The minister said the words. 2 neighbors came. Then they went home, and Cora was alone in the house with Emmett and the debt her father had owed to the man who owned the mercantile. The eviction came 10 days later. The landlord was not cruel. He was practical. He had a family of his own. Cora packed what she could carry: the Bible, her mother's thimble, Emmett's blanket, her father's coat. She left the bed with the leaf carving. She did not look back at it. She had heard there was a rancher north of town who hired help. She had heard he lived alone. She had heard he was fair. That was all she knew. It was enough to point her feet in that direction. She had not known about the blizzard. Silas Thorne had not touched a child in 3 years. He did not think about it in those terms until he felt the weight of Emmett against his shoulder as he lifted the boy from Cora's arms. The child was lighter than he should have been, light as a bird, light as memory. Silas carried him to the kitchen, to the chair by the stove, and laid him on a quilt that had been folded on the shelf. The quilt had been his daughter's. He did not let himself think about that either. Cora stood in the doorway of the kitchen, her arms empty now, her hands hanging at her sides. She was watching him with the particular alertness of a child who has learned that adults are unpredictable. Her eyes were brown, too large for her face, ringed with the blue-gray of exhaustion. Her lips were cracked. Her hair, beneath her wool cap, was matted and filthy. "Sit," Silas said. He pointed to the other chair. "I'll stand," Cora said. "You'll sit before you fall. Then you're no good to anyone." She sat. The movement seemed to collapse her. She folded into the chair like a puppet with cut strings, and Silas saw her hands trembling in her lap. She hid them under her thighs. He had oatmeal on the stove. He had bread from yesterday. He had milk in the cold box, though it was turning. He moved without thinking, the way he moved when a calf was breech or a fence was down, doing what needed to be done because stopping meant death. He put a bowl of oatmeal in front of Cora. She looked at it the way a starving person looks at food, not with greed, but with fear, as if it might disappear. "Eat," Silas said. She picked up the spoon. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold it. She fed herself 3 bites, small, careful. Then she stopped. "Emmett first," she said. "He's too weak for oatmeal. I'll warm milk. You eat." She looked at him for a long moment, measuring something. Then she ate. She did not chew. She swallowed, her throat working, her eyes on the bowl as if someone might take it from her. When she finished, she set the spoon down with a precision that broke his heart. She had been taught not to clatter dishes. Silas warmed the milk on the stove. He found a clean rag and dipped it in the milk, then touched it to Emmett's lips. The boy stirred. His eyes opened, blue, unfocused, the eyes of a child too young to understand what had happened to him. He sucked at the rag. Silas dipped it again and again. "He needs more than that," Cora said. "He'll have it, small at first. His stomach's empty. You fill an empty stomach too fast, it rebels." Cora nodded as if this were wisdom she had already learned and only needed to be reminded of. "My name's Silas Thorne," he said. "This is my ranch. I live alone. I'm not looking for help." Cora's face closed. He saw it happen, the walls coming up behind her eyes. "But you're here," Silas said, "and I'm not turning you out in that. We'll figure the rest in the morning." "We can't stay," Cora said. "I can work. I sew. I can mend. I can scrub. I can tend a garden. I can watch animals. I'll do any work you have." Silas looked at her, 11 years old, offering to scrub his floors for the price of her brother's life. "I believe you would," he said quietly, "but the work can wait. The boy needs warmth. You both do." He built up the fire. He found blankets. He showed her the small room off the kitchen, the one that had been the nursery before it became a storage room, before it became a room he did not enter. He cleared the boxes without looking at them. He put down fresh straw for the mattress and covered it with the quilt. Cora stood in the doorway watching him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Silas paused. He looked at the quilt on the bed. He looked at the window, where the snow was still falling. "I had a daughter once," he said. "She was 3. She liked oatmeal." He did not say more. He left the room before she could ask. In the night, Emmett cried out. Not the weak whimper of a hungry child, but the full, terrified wail of a baby who is woken in a strange place and cannot find the only familiar thing he has left. Cora was up before Silas reached the kitchen. She had Emmett in her arms, rocking him, her face pressed to his hair, murmuring the same words over and over. "I'm here. I'm here. I'm here." Silas stood in the doorway. He watched her. The fire had burned low. The room was dark except for the glow of the embers. Cora was barefoot, her feet white against the plank floor, and she did not seem to feel the cold. All her attention was on the child. "He's afraid," she said, not looking up. "He doesn't know where he is. He knows you're here. He needs to know it's safe, not just me." Silas went to the stove. He stirred the embers and added wood. He filled the kettle. Then, without deciding to, he began to hum. It was a tune his mother had hummed, and his wife after her, and Rose in the months before she learned to speak. A simple melody, no words, just sound. Emmett's crying slowed. He turned his head toward Silas, his eyes wide in the firelight. Cora looked at Silas. She did not say anything, but something in her face shifted. Not trust, not yet, but the first crack in the wall. In the morning, Silas made biscuits. Cora watched him work the dough, her hands restless in her lap. "I can do that," she said. "I know. You don't have to feed us for nothing." Silas set the biscuits on the hearth to bake. He turned to her. "You're not nothing, and I'm not feeding you for nothing. I'm feeding you because you're hungry. The rest we'll sort when the storm breaks." Cora looked at the biscuits. She counted them. "Want to see what happens next? Go to the comments section and click the link in the pinned comment. It's the very first comment you'll see. The story continues exactly where this video ends. I'll see you there.